This is the Podcast Lab. Subscribe now and never miss an episode.
Like a deep dive into what it really means to be like a Gen Z adult right now.
We've got just the right mix of sources, I think, for you.
Yeah.
A personal YouTube account, and then also some like more analytical articles about the influence of like youth culture.
Let's see what we can uncover.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, so our YouTube friend Suburban Will, he's super relatable when he talks about this whole in-between feeling. He's like, technically an adult, got a job.
Yeah.
Insurance even has a 401k, which is pretty impressive for a 24-year-old.
It is, especially when you consider that only about 30% of Gen Z adults in that age range actually have a retirement savings plan.
Wow, that really puts it into perspective.
Based on recent studies.
Yeah, but then he talks about getting called Unc by teenagers online while his coworkers are comparing him to their grandkids.
Right.
It's hilarious, but also points to that awkward phase of early adulthood.
Yes.
Researchers sometimes call it emerging adulthood.
Exactly. It's that period roughly between like 18 and 29 where, you know, young people are navigating this transition to adulthood, but they haven't quite achieved all the like traditional markers like financial independence or starting a family.
Right.
For Gen Z, this in-between feeling could be even more intensified by like rapid technological and cultural change.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And, you know, he mentions this anecdote about like the generational gap at work.
Okay.
Saying his supervisor has been at the company longer than he's been alive.
Wow.
That's like a 25-year difference.
That can create some communication challenges in the workplace, for sure. Think about it. Different generations have different expectations around communication.
Right.
Different styles.
Totally.
The supervisor might be used to like face-to-face interaction, while Suburban Will might be much more comfortable with digital communication.
Yeah.
You know, it also plays out in expectations around work-life balance.
Right.
Gen Z, they're often described as like digital natives, and they tend to really value flexibility and autonomy in their work, which sometimes clashes with more traditional work cultures.
It's interesting how even small things can become big misunderstandings.
Yeah.
Like Suburban Will talks about his coworkers asking him, "What did you do this weekend?" And his response is, "Played Valorant for 6 hours straight."
Oh my gosh.
It's relatable, but might not be what they want to hear.
Yeah. It highlights that shift in priorities.
Okay.
Gen Z came of age during the rise of the gig economy. And they often prioritize things like passion projects and side hustles.
Yeah.
This can be seen as like entrepreneurial and innovative.
Right.
But it can also create tension in a traditional workplace that values that 9-to-5 mentality.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
Suburban Will has this moment where he realizes that even HE is not relatable to younger generations anymore.
Interesting.
He mentions this kid who had no idea what iCarly was.
Wow.
I felt that.
I can imagine. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a great example of how rapid cultural change in the digital age can affect identity formation.
Okay.
Think about it. iCarly was a massively popular show like just a decade ago.
Right.
But for someone growing up with TikTok and YouTube as their primary forms of entertainment, it's ancient history.
Yeah.
Gen Z is bombarded with new trends and new information constantly. It makes it hard to keep up, even for Gen Z themselves.
It's almost like their sense of belonging is constantly shifting.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
They're grappling with a constant influx of like new ideas and new ways of interacting,
Right.
which can be exciting, but also overwhelming.
Yeah.
And this isn't just limited to pop culture.
Okay.
It impacts their worldviews, their understanding of social issues, even their career aspirations.
It makes you wonder how companies stay relevant to a workforce that seems to evolve every few years.
Absolutely. Companies need to be agile and adaptable to attract and retain Gen Z talent.
Yeah.
It's not enough to just use the latest social media platform.
Right.
It's about understanding their values,
Okay.
their communication styles, and their desire for like purpose-driven work.
Okay, but let's address the elephant in the room.
Okay.
The media often portrays Gen Z as these like TikTok-obsessed social media addicts.
Right. It's a common stereotype.
Yeah.
But it's important to push beyond that like superficial view.
Right.
Remember, this is the generation that grew up with smartphones, social media, the internet as integral parts of their lives.
Right.
Technology is their native language.
Yeah.
And they're using it to engage with the world in ways that previous generations just couldn't.
And Suburban Will even talks about how his generation gets blamed for, like, ruining things.
Yeah.
Which is ridiculous.
It is.
Considering they were in school for most of it.
Right.
But he also points out how some people his age are falling for, like, misinformation online.
That's a valid concern.
Yeah.
And it speaks to the importance of media literacy in the digital age.
Okay.
We're all exposed to an overwhelming amount of information.
Right. It's easy to get caught up in echo chambers or fall for, like, misleading content.
Mm-hmm.
His examples like the AI dogfish and the Bill Gates weather machine.
Oh, my gosh.
They perfectly illustrate how quickly misinformation can spread, particularly online.
Totally.
Yeah.
It's a good reminder for all of us to think critically about what we see and read online.
Absolutely.
And speaking of things that require critical thinking, Suburban Will's point about the cost of college versus its perceived payoff,
Yes.
that really resonated with me.
It's a dilemma that many face, not just Gen Z.
Yeah.
The average cost of college has more than doubled since the 1980s.
Wow.
While wages just haven't kept pace.
Right.
This has led many to question the value of a traditional four-year degree,
Mm-hmm.
especially when alternative paths like trade schools, apprenticeships, or online learning platforms are available.
He actually brings up some interesting points about the whole system needing like a revamp,
Interesting.
but we'll get into that later.
Okay.
Now, I have to ask about this dating in the algorithm age thing.
All right.
His banana split analogy is hilarious,
I know, I love it.
but also pretty insightful.
Yeah.
He describes dating apps as offering this like idealized version of romance, like a tempting banana split.
Yeah.
But the reality is often messy and complicated.
Yes.
He's highlighting the commodification of dating and the pressure to present this perfect online persona.
It's true.
And you might not even be in the mood for all that ice cream.
Exactly.
But is this truly a Gen Z problem?
That's a good question.
Technology has changed the dating landscape for everyone, right?
Absolutely. But for Gen Z, who have grown up with social media as their primary mode of communication,
Mm-hmm.
the lines between real life and online persona can be even more blurred.
Okay.
This raises questions about authenticity and intimacy in the digital age.
Interesting.
How do you truly connect with someone when you're constantly filtering yourself through algorithms and curated profiles?
It's a whole new world of dating.
It is.
And it's fascinating to see how Gen Z is navigating it.
Yeah, and it's not just about dating. Right.
It's about how technology shapes our relationships, our identities,
Yeah.
our sense of self in a world where we're constantly connected, but also increasingly isolated.
Whoa, that's deep.
It is.
Okay, I think we've done a pretty good job unpacking Suburban Will's experiences so far.
I think so.
Now I'm curious to see what these articles have to say about Gen Z's impact on, like, culture and activism.
Me too.
Yeah.
Remember, we're just scratching the surface here.
Right.
Gen Z adulthood is a complex, evolving landscape.
Uh-huh.
And understanding their experiences is key to understanding the future of our society as a whole.
Okay, let's dive into those articles and see what other insights we can uncover.
Let's go. Okay, so let's shift gears a little bit
Okay.
and explore Gen Z as like a cultural force.
Right.
These articles really highlight their impact on everything from fashion and music to technology and social change.
What stood out to you?
Yeah, what really jumped out?
Honestly, their whole approach to fashion is fascinating.
Okay, so
They're all about thrifting vintage finds, sustainable fashion choices.
yeah,
It's like a rejection of fast fashion and mass consumerism,
right.
which I think speaks volumes about their values.
It's definitely a conscious choice.
Yeah.
Gen Z is acutely aware of the environmental impact of their consumption habits.
Right.
And they're actively seeking out alternatives.
Yeah.
It's not just about buying secondhand clothes.
Right.
They're also upcycling, customizing, creating their own unique pieces.
It's a form of self-expression and activism all rolled into one.
Exactly.
And this DIY ethos extends to how they consume music and entertainment, too.
Okay, interesting. How so?
They're not relying on traditional media.
Uh-huh.
They're discovering their favorite artists on platforms like TikTok and YouTube.
Exactly. It's a complete democratization of the entertainment industry.
Yeah.
Anyone with a smartphone and a good idea can potentially go viral and reach a global audience. We're seeing this surge in niche content creators catering to specific interests and subcultures that traditional media might have overlooked.
Okay, so we've talked about fashion and music, but what about this whole activism thing?
Okay, yeah.
Is Gen Z really more politically active than previous generations?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And the answer is a little bit nuanced.
Okay.
Gen Z is undeniably vocal and engaged with social issues.
Right.
But whether their level of activism surpasses previous generations at the same age is debatable.
Okay, but you can't deny that they're making their voices heard.
Oh, absolutely.
They're organizing climate strikes, protesting for social justice, using social media to mobilize for change.
Absolutely. And they're doing it in the way that's distinct to their generation.
Okay.
They're leveraging digital tools to connect, organize, and amplify their message.
Right.
They're also more comfortable challenging traditional power structures and demanding accountability from institutions and leaders.
So maybe it's not about being more active, but about being active in a different way.
Exactly.
Using the tools and strategies that are native to them.
I think that's a fair assessment.
Yeah.
They're confronting a different set of challenges.
Right.
And they're responding with the tools and strategies that are available to them in the digital age.
You know, one thing that really struck me was Suburban Will's analogy about adulthood feeling like he's walking around his room in the dark.
Yeah, I love that analogy.
Everything is familiar, but he's still figuring out his way.
It's a powerful analogy that speaks to the uncertainty that many young adults are feeling right now.
Right.
They're entering a world that's rapidly changing,
Yeah.
facing complex issues like climate change, economic instability, social unrest.
It's like they're building the plane while they're flying it.
Exactly.
And that can be both exhilarating and terrifying.
For sure.
So what does all this mean for our listener?
Okay.
What's the takeaway here?
I think the key takeaway is that Gen Z adulthood is a mixed bag.
Okay.
They're facing unique challenges, but they're also bringing unique strengths and perspectives to the table.
Right.
They're tech-savvy entrepreneurial, passionate about making a difference.
They're also dealing with a lot of pressure and uncertainty.
Absolutely.
The cost of living is skyrocketing. The job market is incredibly competitive.
Yeah.
The future can feel pretty bleak at times.
But they're also resilient, adaptable, and optimistic.
Sure.
They're not afraid to challenge the status quo and demand a better future.
Yeah.
And they're just getting started.
Right.
They're going to be shaping the world for decades to come.
It's both inspiring and a bit daunting, isn't it?
It is. And that's why it's so important to understand their experiences, their values, and their aspirations.
Okay, let's go back to Suburban Will for a second.
Okay.
He ended his video on a surprisingly hopeful note, talking about how Gen Z has the potential to make the world a better place.
I found that really inspiring.
Yeah.
He acknowledges the challenges, but he doesn't give in to despair.
He sees the potential of his generation.
Yeah.
And he's excited to be a part of it.
And that's a powerful message.
It is.
It's a reminder that even in the face of uncertainty and adversity, there's always hope.
There is.
Okay, so we've talked about the challenges, the strengths, the activism, the anxieties.
Right.
But we haven't really addressed his frustration with the current education system and the rising costs of college.
True.
This ties back to that in-between feeling many young adults experience.
Right.
They're told they need a college degree to succeed, but then they graduate with mountains of debt and a job market that doesn't always value their skills.
Exactly.
He makes this provocative statement about how college should be more about preparing people for the real world,
Okay.
not just academics.
Interesting.
He even suggests that maybe some of the money spent on traditional education could be better used to support entrepreneurship and innovation.
It's a thought-provoking argument.
It raises questions about the evolving role of higher education in the 21st century. We're seeing a rise in alternative learning paths like online courses, coding boot camps, apprenticeships that focus on practical skills and real-world experience.
It makes you wonder if the traditional four-year degree is becoming less relevant in a rapidly changing job market.
It's certainly a conversation worth having.
For sure.
And it's not just about Gen Z.
Right.
It's about how we as a society adapt our education systems to prepare future generations for the challenges and opportunities of a world that's increasingly driven by technology and innovation.
No, I have to circle back to this dating in the algorithm age thing.
Right, that's good.
Suburban Will's banana split analogy was brilliant.
It was.
But I'm curious to delve deeper into how technology is changing relationships across generations.
It's a fascinating topic.
It is.
Technology has undoubtedly transformed the dating landscape. From the rise of dating apps to the way we communicate and connect with potential partners.
Right.
But it's not just about finding love.
Oh.
It's also about how technology shapes our expectations, our communication styles, even our sense of self.
He talks about this pressure to present a perfect online persona.
Right.
Which can make it difficult to be authentic and vulnerable.
It's like we're constantly curating our lives for an imaginary audience.
Yeah.
And that can make it hard to form genuine connections.
Right.
And this isn't just limited to romantic relationships.
Okay.
It affects our friendships, our family relationships, even our professional interactions.
It's almost like we're all performing for each other.
Yeah.
Trying to present the best version of ourselves instead of just being real.
And that can be exhausting.
Totally.
It can also lead to a sense of isolation and loneliness. Even when we're surrounded by people both online and offline.
Yeah.
This constant pressure to perform can take a toll on our mental health and well-being.
It makes you wonder if we've lost something in this transition to a hyper-connected world.
It's a valid concern.
Yeah.
And it's something that Gen Z, who have grown up immersed in this digital landscape,
Right.
are grappling with in a very real way.
Yeah.
They're navigating the complexities of online identity, social comparison, and the constant pressure to be on all the time.
It's a lot to process.
It is.
And it makes me think about the importance of setting boundaries and creating space for genuine connection both online and offline.
Absolutely.
But, despite all these anxieties, Suburban Will also talks about this entrepreneurial spirit that seems to define his generation.
Absolutely. They're turning their side hustles into full-time careers.
Yeah.
Creating their own opportunities and building businesses online. They're not waiting for permission to succeed.
Right.
They're taking matters into their own hands.
It's like they're not afraid to experiment and try new things, even if it means failing sometimes.
They embrace a growth mindset where failure is seen as a learning opportunity, a chance to iterate and improve. It's a very different mentality from previous generations who might have been more risk-averse.
And that fearlessness is a huge asset.
It is.
It allows them to challenge outdated norms and come up with innovative solutions.
Precisely. They're not bound by the same limitations that previous generations might have faced.
Yeah.
They're comfortable with technology. They're adept at navigating the digital world.
Right.
And they're not afraid to break the rules and create their own paths.
Okay, so we've talked about the good, the bad, and the complicated.
We have.
But what does the future hold for Gen Z?
Okay.
What happens when they fully step into their roles as leaders, decision makers, and agents of change?
That's the million-dollar question.
It is.
And it's impossible to predict with certainty.
Right.
But we can make some educated guesses based on what we've observed so far.
What do you think?
Well, I think it's safe to say that they're going to continue to challenge the status quo.
Okay.
And push for a more just equitable and sustainable world. They're going to be the ones tackling the big challenges like climate change, social injustice, and economic inequality.
They're also going to be the ones driving innovation in technology, business, and culture.
Absolutely.
And they're going to be the ones redefining what it means to be an adult in the 21st century.
Exactly.
So what can our listener do to stay ahead of the curve and understand this emerging generation?
I think the most important thing is to stay curious.
Okay.
Pay attention to what Gen Z is doing, what they're saying, and what they care about.
Right.
Be open to their ideas and perspectives,
Yeah.
even if they seem strange or challenging at first.
Right.
Remember, they're the future.
Yeah.
And the more we understand them, the better equipped we'll be to navigate the world they're creating.
All right, we've covered a lot of ground here today.
We have.
From Suburban Will's relatable anecdotes to the broader trends shaping Gen Z adulthood. But before we wrap things up, there's one more topic I want to explore. You mentioned that Gen Z is going to redefine what it means to be an adult in the 21st century.
Right.
What does that look like to you?
That's where it gets really interesting.
Oh,
They're
wow.
questioning these traditional markers of adulthood,
Right.
like home ownership, marriage,
Right.
even what it means to have a successful career.
Okay.
Remember Suburban Will's frustration with the college system?
Yeah.
That's part of it.
Right.
They're looking for alternative paths. They're prioritizing experiences over material possessions
Okay.
and valuing things like flexibility and autonomy in their work lives.
It's like they're rewriting the rules of the game.
It is.
Yeah.
And that can be unsettling for those who came of age with a more traditional set of expectations.
Right.
But it's also incredibly exciting.
I agree.
It opens up possibilities for a more diverse, inclusive, and fulfilling definition of adulthood.
So we've explored the ups and downs, the anxieties, the aspirations of what it means to be like a Gen Z adult in 2024.
We have.
But where do we go from here?
Right.
What's the one thing you want our listener to walk away pondering?
If we connect all these threads, the cultural shifts,
Okay.
the economic pressures,
Yeah.
the search for meaning, the redefinition of adulthood.
Right.
I think the most important question becomes like, what kind of world does Gen Z want to build?
Okay.
You know, they're inheriting a lot of problems, but they also have these incredible tools and a unique perspective.
Yeah.
It's not about like blaming them or praising them.
Right.
It's about understanding their situation and seeing how we can all contribute to something better.
It's like Suburban Will said, right?
Yes.
They might have been born too late to explore the world and too early to explore the stars, but they're here now,
Right.
figuring things out in real time.
Exactly. And that's not just a Gen Z thing.
Okay.
It's on all of us.
Right.
No matter our generation. To engage with that question, what kind of future are we creating collectively?
Okay.
And how can we support and collaborate with Gen Z to make that future a reality?
I love that.
Yeah.
It moves beyond stereotypes and makes it like a shared responsibility. And within that shared responsibility, I'm particularly intrigued by their entrepreneurial spirit,
Yeah.
not just in business,
Right.
but in how they approach like problems in general.
Yes.
They're DIYing solutions, building communities online, pushing for systemic change.
Their comfort with technology and their willingness to experiment allows them to approach problems in new and innovative ways.
Right.
They're not afraid to challenge assumptions or try things that might have seemed impossible to previous generations.
Okay, so final takeaway for our listener,
Right.
Gen Z adulthood, is this fascinating, messy, hopeful work in progress.
It is.
It's full of relatable struggles, but also some serious potential for positive change.
And no matter what generation you belong to, engaging with that change, understanding their aspirations, and finding ways to collaborate,
Yeah.
that's how we make this a world worth inheriting.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Awesome.
And hey, listener, we'd love to hear your thoughts on all of this.
Yes.
What resonated with you? What surprised you?
Yeah.
Hit us up on social media.
Let's keep this conversation going.
And let's keep this conversation going until next time.
Keep diving deep.